Hey guys, and welcome to British Guy Reacts. Now, I've got a very interesting video to react to today, I think. It is, could the United States of America invade the United Kingdom? So I've got a vested interest in this one. If nothing else, it will determine how nice I need to be to my American subscribers. So, but before we get there though, we have just blasted past 5,000 subscribers, which is so much more than I ever expected. I am eternally grateful to anyone who has subscribed. I will gladly fight your enemies, just list them in the comment section, up to a height of 3 foot. And not too much muscle mass, like a squirrel. If your enemy's a squirrel, I will fight it for you. And if not, why not? Subscribe, and I'll punch a squirrel for you, possibly. So without getting too much into punching squirrels, let's go to the video. So this is Binkov's Battlegrounds, and it's could the US invade the UK if it wanted to? Now, I think it could. Because America's defence spending, I believe, is higher than the next 10 countries combined. But I'm very interested to see what this guy's take on it is. It's obviously slightly controversial because it's got 4,300 dislikes. But yeah, I'm very interested to find out the answer to this, even though, of course, reality very close allies. So let's play.
We all know US and UK are close allies, and that US armed might is far greater than
that. Okay, I've got to stop it here. So people always say Britain's such a small country. No, it's not. It's bloody huge. Look at this. It's nearly as big as America. I'm sure these proportions are 100% accurate.
UK, but just for argument's
sake,
and
shrunk.
to learn what sort of limitations waging warfare across the ocean implies, this video will explore US invading the United Kingdom.
So this is without nukes,
so with just the airplanes and ships left to count on, is an invasion over the Atlantic viable?
Okay. So I presume if both sides...
Binkov. Welcome to Binkov's HQ. You know, not many managed to invade Britain. Ones that did were the Vikings.
Yeah.
And if you like Vikings,
we got reparations, Denmark. Disgusting.
Did you know that people
remember Lindisfarne? Justice for Lindisfarne.
The number of actual Vikings that ever lived. Join gamers from all around the world and use game's social features. The game comes highly recommended, completely free to play, and features great graphics. Play on your own or join a clan. It's gonna be worth your time.
Sounds cool.
I like to let others do the dirty work while I beef up my economy.
Well, that's less cool.
And work with my allies to crush the enemies. Join Vikings War of Clans for free using the link in the description box today. You will get a bonus of 200 gold coins and devices.
Who doesn't want gold coins?
For a quick start. Play now and live, build and fight like a Viking.
Yeah, go do that, except for the actual
US
killing
military
people bit.
Successfully invade UK if it wanted to. Some rules will apply.
No allies, no
US
nukes.
no
okay,
overseas
that makes sense.
And all other countries are impassable. Distance from US to UK mainland is pretty big, especially when reaching London.
So looking at the rules, this makes it interesting because clearly, if there was unlimited time, America would eventually roll over Britain. It's just a much bigger country, much bigger military, much bigger economy. What makes it interesting is that they got the 1 year time limit. So it's basically, could Britain hold out for a year? Again, I still think the answer is no, but I'm very interested to hear what this talking puppet thinks is the answer. Or is having no nukes obviously matters, because otherwise it would just be a disaster for both sides. But yeah, so this is becoming more interesting. There's actually more even, I think.
Before trying to land any troops, the seas must first be clear of British ships.
Right.
The Royal Air Force must be suppressed. US has a massive advantage when it comes to naval assets. Basically, all of its assets are made for oceans and could operate near UK if needed. While the Americans would need to sail to and from Britain, taking weeks away from their actual presence, the US Navy could pretty much do whatever it pleases near the UK. So it's interesting to point out that most of US ships do not carry anti-ship missiles. The US Navy prefers to use their carriers for such missions. British Royal Navy is to go down a similar route. Their harpoon
I think that's slightly out of date. I think it does now. That's out of date. I think the
only a minor part.
It does now have the F-35s, but I doubt it will make that much difference considering that they'll be outnumbered about 10 to 1.
The British fleet has modern air defense systems. Basically, the sea war would be fought above the sea and under it.
By missiles.
But the British lacked anti-ship missiles for its aircraft. Furthermore, British Tornado aircraft ceased to train for the anti-ship missions almost 2 decades ago. Basically, if UK had to try and do air raids against US fleet, it would be down to two weapons: laser-guided bombs and short-range tactical missiles.
Okay.
Brimstone in particular
this
might
is,
be the weapon of
this
choice.
is sounding not so
While
good.
its warhead is tiny, Brimstone 2 has a
9
decent
kilograms.
range.
Yeah.
Still, against dozens of potent destroyers designed to deal with many anti-ship missiles at once, it's unlikely UK could do much.
Okay.
British best bet
It's a bad
would be
start.
their submarines. They're fairly modern. Theoretically, the British could use their ballistic missile subs as attack subs as well, and speed up the entry into service of another astute sub, while keeping one Trafalgar running a bit
But
longer,
look how
rummaging for retired
31
sailors
Los
and
Angeles
crewing.
attack subs.
Still, the British would be far outnumbered. US submarine fleet dwarfs theirs. Given a bit less time on station and British home advantage when it comes to resupply, the balance of power may not be quite 6-1. Still, it's no question the British subs would get hunted down within months. Aerial anti-submarine platforms would also play a large role. And while the British could use all their assets, even just the deployable portion of US assets would be enough to force the British subs into hiding.
Okay.
Furthermore, US carrier-based air power would make it hard for British anti-sub helicopters to operate. Domain force projection would be done by US carriers, naturally. US could choose whether to use more carriers initially and then have less available later on, or to maintain a smaller number on constant patrol. To defeat the British Air Force, the former is more likely. US nominally has 11 carriers, but only 9 air wings. It does have an additional
11 carriers, so that's crazy. So I know the UK now has 2 carriers, although one of them isn't fully operational. I don't know, I think Russia's got 1, China's got 1 and is building several more, but as far as I'm aware, it's only got 1 actually like in service. France has got 1. So I mean, the extent to which America isn't just the most powerful military in the world, but it's just so much more powerful than any other military is just so hard to comprehend. I mean, the American fleet, I presume, could probably take on the next 4 put together. It's very impressive.
Support wing, which is a lot bigger. It may be the source of 1 or 2 more combat wings after some months of preparation. But crews aren't the only issue. Lifespan of a carrier necessarily involves lengthy maintenance periods. Important to note is that the deployable
that's not going to help us so much because it's got 18-month deployment. This lasts a year.
1 or 2 deployments are made during those 18 months. Missions are usually 6 to 8 months long, and several months are needed to prep the carrier and its wing for another mission. Shorter missions might give more deployments in the short term, but in the long term, they would require even more maintenance for every month spent out at sea.
Okay.
Because of all that, it's unrealistic US would send out more than 6 carriers at once.
So that makes it a bit more even. So I think this video was made before they were in service, but that would be 6 American carriers to 2 British. And the British would have shorter supply lines. So whilst it's still 3-1 in the Americans' favour, it's not the kind of absolutely insane odds it would be if both had their entire force projection. You playing? You play, please. Thank you.
Similar issues would affect the aviation assault ships.
Okay.
Perhaps 4 to 6 could be deployed at once, after some preparations. Grand total of combat planes US Navy and Marine Corps could muster in a few months-long air campaign is thus smaller than the total number of US planes. US might fly in fresh planes to replace ones that got lost. Flying them over the ocean to a carrier would be doable. What could the Brits...
So the Americans have 1,000 planes against 180 for the British. That is pretty terrifying. Yeah, let's be nice to America. I'm going to write to the Prime Minister tomorrow and recommend.
Which respond with. Royal Air Force is smaller than even the readily available US planes deployed on carriers.
No.
Another huge issue for the British would be their lack of air defenses.
Okay.
Everything they currently have are fairly low altitude systems, meaning the US would be free to bomb them from high up with guided weapons. UK would also suffer the US cruise missile barrage. While the Brits have some such missiles of their own, it's unlikely they would be used against the faraway US bases. Even the subs that could carry them would be better utilized for defense of the homeland. While not all could be launched at once, US could sustain the effort. The British
So
Air Force would
that's an interesting point. Whether if they wanted to, the British subs could launch some, because obviously there's no nukes in this scenario, but whether they could launch some cruise missiles at kind of key American targets, so like Washington DC. I mean, clearly in this case, London or much of London will get flattened, or well, not the whole city, the key government buildings, I presume. But it'd be kind of interesting to know what chance the UK would have of having some kind of strike back.
Be mostly paralyzed on the ground. US has also a much bigger recon platform fleet, especially when it comes to satellites. British lack those, as in the real world they timeshare some US spy satellites. US aircraft would be looking for targets as well. Britain would have no real means of scouting the US bases. US AWACS type planes
would be plentiful, Google Maps.
While British ones would mostly be trapped on the ground, with runways and highways being mostly inoperative. Thus the Royal Air Force would slowly get destroyed on the ground. When they would be able to get some planes airborne, they still may not choose to engage the Americans, as it's likely US attack waves would be made of close to 100 planes with possibly as many fighters as Britain would muster for each local interception, or more.
So it's like the Battle of Britain 2, but
be a roughly
with a different
equal
result.
Kill ratio in the air. And when the losses on the ground are included over months of a protracted bombing campaign, US would still be left with a sizable force. All this didn't even include the US Air Force. Well, the scenario requires it to use the bases inside the
Wait,
US.
so that was just the American naval the American Navy's planes. That is so literally. This video should probably be to make it fair. It should be could the American Navy defeat Britain in a war? Like leave out the army, leave out the Air Force. But then, let's make things fair. Queensberry rules.
Could be reached. At first, bombers would be deployed cruise missiles,
B-52s.
but later on, they would be likely used for bombing missions. But could the Air Force tactical plane fleet help out as well? With very ample in-flight refueling, the answer is yes. US operates the world's biggest air tanker fleet. The Hercules-based tankers, however, are too small and would use most of the fuel just to get near Britain.
They've got 450 tankers. That's absolutely insane. The American Air Force must be like if they did like a parade of all of it in one go, it would be the most epic thing I think that humanity has ever produced.
The remainder of the fleet has a substantial fuel offload capacity, and tankers could refuel each other. Such ops may sound complex, but compared to what the British did in Falklands War, they're fairly basic. The British used a dozen tankers to refuel themselves repeatedly, keeping the bomber refueled throughout all of the route. While all of
that's a really famous operation where they attacked Port Stanley Airport after the Argentinians had captured the Falklands. And they flew a Vulcan all the way from Britain to the Falkland Islands with about, as this guy said, about 6 tankers. And I think they left like 1 crater in the runway or something. It's kind of like a propaganda victory, I suppose, but I don't think it actually did much on the ground. I might be wrong about that.
Fleet would not be available due to maintenance. The rest could still offload significant fuel loads just outside Britain if needed. With several refuelings per plane, US Air Force could still expect to have around 400 combat planes in action practically every day. The British would really have no chance in the air. Within months, the US would have complete control of the air. And thus the second phase
I think at that point they've won,
might commence.
effectively.
By that time, British ships would be mostly dead, even if they hugged the shores and just aided in the air defenses. British submarines might hold out a bit longer, if not being used to actively hunt down US ships. But even if British subs managed to kill 2 US vessels for each of their own, final result would be the end of the Royal Navy. So at around 6 months or so into the war, the landings would be mostly unopposed, except for the Royal Army.
I mean, it seems pretty clear that the Americans are going to win this, because once you've got air supremacy, I think you have it in a modern war. Like, I mean, unless we're talking guerrilla war, but I'm kind of assuming that we're not going into that scenario. But yes, what the Americans got air supremacy. They've sunk the Royal Navy. It looks pretty close to game over now in terms of conventional fighting. And they could
defending the shores. 6 months would be enough for US to assemble pretty much all of their active and reserve assets. In addition to landing ships, US could count on numerous cargo assets of its Sea Lift Command and Reserve fleet.
20,000 is not as many as I'd expected.
US Airborne could also help, with the numbers shown probably growing with newly trained
50,000.
paratroopers.
Okay.
Getting additional
That's more
heavier
like what I
equipment for them,
expected.
however, would not be
Stop!
likely.
So 50,000 American troops landing by air and 20,000. No, wait. 50,000 landing by sea and 20,000 landing by air. And I think they said the UK in total had got 85,000 or something. But I presume the Americans could reinforce. Also, I guess this is kind of where the UK is. I presume the 85,000 figure includes a kind of UK reserve army, I think a territorial army. I mean, unlike America, we don't have very many guns in kind of private hands here, for better or worse. So if you can beat the army, but I mean, I guess there'll be some time to kind of maybe like arm. Well, I don't know about arming some of the civilian population, but like raising some extra troops, you'd have thought. I don't know. But it's how quick it goes.
Given the time limit. US transport plane fleet is pretty big.
It's enormous.
And should be able to drop all the airborne troops within days. US could be looking at close to 30,000 troops during the first day, and close to 20,000 more the day after. Subsequent days would see fewer and fewer troops being added, and more supplies being brought in. The British would enjoy more soldiers than shown before. The reserve mentioned covers only the soldiers receiving some training periodically.
Oh, so actually, in which case the UK has quite a significant ground number advantage in the immediate attack if it's got 147,000. I suppose this is the thing with time. Like, clearly, if it's a war of attrition, America's going to win. It's a much bigger population, it's a much bigger economy. It's a question of if it's a 1 year time limit, can this 147,000 hold out? I still think without air support, they're screwed. But we'll see what this guy reckons. Or at least we will if I can get the video to play.
And soldiers for whom some heavy equipment is stored. In an event of a total war, Britain would be using those 6 months to mobilize as many soldiers as possible. While they would be equipped with basically just rifles, and while their training would be less than adequate, they would still boost the overall.
I'm probably included in this figure, so I've got a feeling in this scenario I'm probably about to get flattened by a B-52.
Numbers several times.
Worse things to be flattened by.
Yet all those soldiers may not be enough, as UK has a problem of geography. Its landmass is just too large. Its coastline is very long. Even when taking just the western part of its coastline into account, the area to be defended is huge. And what about the islands? Perfect for US to take and entrench themselves at, before launching further landings from them. Most of those areas are sufficiently far away from the mainland that British artillery would not be much of a factor. And what about Northern Ireland? There are just too many places for US to concentrate its assault on. The British would not be able to move their forces around easily and protect those islands or the Northern Ireland.
Because the Americans have air
So the islands would fall one by one. Then either Northern Ireland would be taken or part of Great Britain would fall. Hard to traverse overland Scotland would be an obvious choice, though that would also slow down US breakthrough as well later.
I mean, Scotland's got a much lower population density than England. So in terms of the kind of... Well, I mean, I suppose in terms of civilian resistance, you'd expect there to be less. But I mean, if the army moves around, I suppose that's the same.
Cornwall or Devon are also decent picks, as British defenders lack room to swoop down on the US beachhead from all directions.
That's true.
Such areas would likely be more heavily populated by British military to begin with. Once the US manages to secure ports and airfields and brings in US Army reinforcements, it would be basically game over for the British. US would build up its helicopter force on the areas it has taken, which is considerable. While the British have a fleet of their own to help quickly distribute its
wow! Sorry, I'm just looking at these figures. The Americans have got 3,000 helicopters, which can carry 45,000 troops. The British have 203 helicopters, which can carry 3,500 troops. I'm not so confident about those figures.
Forces where needed, their numbers
I think,
are small. Both sides would, of course,
I think that's going to work out badly for the British.
Be losing many helicopters. US to British low-level air defenses and British to US fighter cover, which would continuously be flying over the important areas. The British would have only a small part of shown inventory of heavy weapons present at any one point the US attacks.
Okay.
While US would also not be disembarking thousands of its Abrams tanks or 10,000 of other heavy combat vehicles, the overwhelming fire support coming from various directions would more than make up for it. Fire support from the ships may come in form of MLR units firing from the ships rather than actual gun barrage.
I didn't know that was a
ships
thing
still lack
people did.
long-range gun rounds.
Yeah.
Attack helicopters are another way of concentrating force in one area quickly. But again, the British are far outmatched,
Yeah.
even if just half of US numbers are present.
792
The issue for the
Apaches.
Americans would be time. As the scenario asks what can be achieved within 1 year,
Yeah,
US would be
as I
under
said.
pressure to progress from their multiple beachheads. Northern Ireland is likely to fall within the 1 year time limit, but only minor parts of the Great Britain would be overrun by the Americans during the same time period.
Okay.
The British would put up a hell of a fight. Ground troop loss ratio would favor the British somewhat, but when Air Force and Navy losses are added in, where Britain would suffer more heavily, the US would come out fine. With added large chunks of conquered territory, the US could call itself a victor.
That seems plausible.
Big thanks goes to all my patrons on Patreon. Without you, we...
That definitely seems plausible. Like, if it was a long-term thing, and America can use the full might of its huge population and huge industrial base, you would assume that they would be able to conquer the whole of the UK. Again, if no nukes are used. But in a year, yeah, that seems plausible. But yeah, so based on that, I'm now going to be really, really nice to all my American subscribers because I don't want you to invade us. And I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it interesting. Please do like, comment, subscribe, like all those other YouTuber things. And I hope to see you again. Thank you.